President Trump is roiling financial markets today around the world, escalating his trade war with China and attacking the chair of the Federal Reserve. All this as he heads off to herald the strength of the U.S. economy at the G7 summit this weekend in France. Responding to a retaliatory move by China early today, the president tonight declared that he's hiking U.S. tariffs on Beijing, raising existing rates, as well as those set to kick in next month. It comes after China announced this morning that they were imposing a new round of tariffs on $75 billion worth of American goods. The news was met with outrage at the White House, where the president took it to Twitter and attempted to order all American companies to cut their ties with China. All American companies, no more trade with China. Of course, that's ridiculous. Trump tweeted, "We don't need China, and frankly, would be better off without them. Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China, including bringing your companies home and making your products in the USA." Well, that's the president this morning trumpeting powers he doesn't possess. However, the Washington Post points out the White House does not have the authority to force companies to follow such directives as that. According to the Census Bureau, the United States has a $380 billion trade deficit, however, with China in 2018. A deficit appears to be increasing this year. Look at those numbers. Trump's tweet ignited a rapid sell-off on Wall Street late today. The Dow, which had been in positive territory going into today, plunged suddenly and closed down 623 points just in one day, though it remains near its average for the summer. Earlier today, the president appeared to joke about the market's decline, saying the Dow is down. Perhaps of the news that Representative Seth Moulton, whoever that may be, has dropped out of the 2020 presidential race. Wow, what a card. All of this comes after Fed Chair Jerome Powell said this morning that trade policy uncertainty seems to be playing a role in the global slowdown. Well, his speech, which was intended to reassure markets, instead prompted an attack from the president. Quote, "As usual, the Fed did nothing. It is incredible that they can speak without knowing or asking what I am doing, which will be announced shortly. We have a very strong dollar and a very weak Fed." And then in a stunning move, the president added, "My only question is, who is our bigger enemy, Jay Powell or Chairman Xi of China?" I'm joined right now by Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, Joe Colvin's White House reporter for the Washington Post, and Ambassador Michael Froman is Vice Chairman of MasterCard and a former U.S. trade rep in the Obama administration. Thank you all. This is going to be very powerful. Let's talk about I'm a big believer that the trade deficit with China has to be dealt with because China keeps making money off us, which they do by selling us some great goods. There's no doubt about it. We love their stuff, especially their cotton goods and all that stuff. But they use all that exchange they get from us to buy the rest of the world, especially Africa. I don't like it. Ben, your thoughts about what should we be doing if not this? But let's start with Trump. What's he doing? What's he up to?
The problem is he doesn't really know what he's doing, Chris. He has gotten into this, and the only play he's had is to escalate this trade war with the Chinese. But I don't think anybody knows where this is leading. And the Chinese have clearly decided to dig in and to match him move for move. And the risk is that he's not only raising prices on Americans, hurting American sectors like the agricultural sector, but he's dragging down the entire global economy. The way to do this, if you wanted to stand up to China's unfair trade practices, if you wanted to stand up for American workers and businesses, is not to alienate the United States from the rest of the world and take on the Chinese alone. It would be to rally all of our allies, the people he's seeing at the G7, the countries that we negotiated with, that Mike Froman negotiated with in the Obama administration in the Asia-Pacific region, so that we have a united front with other countries to go to the Chinese and say, you need to cut out your theft of intellectual property. You need to cut out your unfair trade practices.
Ben, has anyone been able to do that, get the world to take on China? Because they're the big monster. Has anybody in the world, has any president, including Obama, been able to do that?
Well, Chris, unfortunately, we were building up to that type of capacity. The trade agreement that we negotiated, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, with a number of the leading Asia-Pacific economies, was meant to give President of the United States greater leverage for that type of confrontation. And I think what you need to do is you need a president who can bring people together. But Hillary wouldn't go along with it. But Hillary wouldn't go along with it. And that was a mistake by Hillary. And frankly, I think the Democrats have to learn, too, Chris. Look, it's not just about free trade. It's about trade agreements that can work for American businesses and workers, trade agreements that are more progressive. If voters are looking for someone who's going to tear up trade agreements and have trade wars, they have that candidate in Donald Trump. And it's not delivering good results. I think the Democrats can put forward a different alternative that is about rallying the world to our side.
Ben, you're the best. In fact, I'm not getting into the Clinton war because there was an interesting war because Bill Clinton, I was in Tokyo when he said he thought it was a fabulous agreement, the TPP. And you know, politics in this country, Hillary came out against it. I know how politics work. Anyway, let's go to you, Joe. You're with the Associated Press. Tell me, does Trump just get petulant? Or does he have a strategy to really take on China? Somebody's got to take on China.
The president has been saying now for decades that China has been ripping the U.S. off.
Well,
and as he stood there, as we saw in the South Lawn today, and literally, summoned the sky and said that he'd been appointed, he was the chosen one to take on China. He does feel like China has been ripping us off, and he feels like
disagree?
He wants to take them on.
Does anybody disagree with that premise that somebody has to do it?
I think that that's a pretty, even as the TPP agreement was trying to address, absolutely. And so he believes that he is the one to do this, and that it makes sense for him to risk some potential economic hardship in order to get that done, in order to seem strong. But the problem is that the way that he's been doing this has created these economic ripple effects across the globe that really are now threatening his reelection chances.
Well, earlier this morning, Trump's director of trade policy, Peter Navarro, said that China's latest round of tariffs shouldn't affect financial markets. Should have told that.
$75 billion worth of tariffs in terms of the combined $30 trillion economy is not something for the stock market to worry about, and we're cool here.
How can you beat the Chinese? It's a command economy, a command society. Xi's the boss. He can do the stuff that Trump says he thinks he can do. Sell American, tell Americans they can't trade with you. How do you beat them?
Well, look, I think you organize all of your like-minded countries, Europe, Canada, Japan, major emerging economies, to put pressure on China on the issues that are legitimately out there, including their overcapacity. And that's what we were doing at the end of the Obama administration. You organize the countries in the region to set higher standards and higher rules for trade that China will be forced to compete with. And then you use all the tools at your disposal to hold China to account for violating.
You think China can be beaten in this war because this is the 21st century? The way they're going, they will beat us.
I think they have a strategy that they're executing on very well. I think it's important for us to also have a strategy, including a domestic strategy that's around investing in research and technology, lifelong learning, portable benefits, all the things we're going to need, whether it's trade or whether it's technology, that's going to affect the American worker. We got to make sure the American worker can succeed in a rapidly changing economy.
Are we better than they in innovation? Can we win that war that way? We can't beat it in population. They got to outpopulate us, obviously.
Traditionally, we have great universities. We have great research.
Yeah, most of the great universities are here.
We are a leader in innovation, but they are also catching up quite a bit in a number of areas, and according to some, ahead of us in some of the areas. So we shouldn't be complacent about it, and we haven't invested in the same way domestically as they have.
Why don't we buy everything from Vietnam?
Well, we are buying a certain amount from
Wouldn't that screw the Chinese? And we said, no, we'd like to buy stuff from Vietnam now.
Look, China is the second largest economy in the world, the first largest consumer economy in the world. It's important for our exporters, our companies, and our workers and farmers to have access to that market. So getting market access, leveling the playing field, having fair trade with them is important. And I think the president has created a certain amount of leverage in his initial threatening of putting tariffs on. But you got to translate that leverage into actual agreements. And that's the hard part, because it's easy just to impose tariffs. It's hard to take them off. And once tariffs are in place for a while, people get used to them.
Let me go back to Ben on the politics of this thing, because I think there is you ought to fight with China. I think Trump may be doing it the wrong way. These Chinese, the culture is so long term. Their indifference curve is so long. They're willing to, they'll take eons to get what they want to get. And we're thinking about Friday night and what movie we're going to. Let me ask you about a fight that seems to be totally deleterious. Stupid. Why is he attacking his Fed chairman so publicly? Does he think he can get lower rates and help the economy get some more soup in it if he just bashes this guy every day on television?
No, Chris, here's what I think is going on, right? We are potentially heading into an economic downturn, potentially recession, because of the reckless leadership of Donald Trump. The tools that you would have in place to try to stimulate an economy, we don't have those in place because Donald Trump gave away $1 trillion in his tax bill, largely in corporate tax cuts to the wealthy. The Fed already has low rates. Donald Trump is looking for other people to blame if the recession comes, the downturn comes before his election. So he's set up the Fed. He's set up Xi Jinping. He's going to set up the Democrats in Congress. Anybody but himself, the chosen one, as he says, anyone but himself to blame.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.